So this concept that you need to end your own life because you are suffering, or you need to end the lives of others because they are suffering, is entirely antithetical to the Bible. You cannot be a Christian and believe these things. You cannot be a Lutheran and believe these things. Welcome to another episode of Christian Combatives. I'm your host and servant in Jesus Christ. Today we're going to be talking about a more serious subject, maybe a weightier subject. We're going to be talking about suffering and whether it's okay to end a person's life, whether it's your own or somebody else's life, either because they are suffering or in anticipation that they will suffer in the future. So first, I want to go to the fifth commandment. The fifth commandment, it's got Luther's Small Catechism in front of me right here. What is the fifth commandment? You shall not murder. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in his body, but help and support him in every physical need. All right, so as this the basis for your understanding on whether or not you should take a human life. If you go back and you watch, I did a video, it's probably on the 10 Commandments and the fifth commandment. I said basically one of the things that you can look at to understand whether or not something is murder or killing. Murder is unlawful killing. Killing is just the ending of a life. Whether something is the sin of murder is, one, do you have the authority to take a person's life? And two, do you have the justification to take a person's life? So for example, God gives the authority to the state to bear the sword, to take somebody's life. So the state, the government, actually has the authority to take somebody's life. But they also have to fulfill the second requirement, which is justice. Is it just? Is it a good legal ruling that this person's life be ended? If both of those things are fulfilled, whether it's in war, whether it's in a judgment, capital punishment, whether it's one of those two things, whether it's self-defense, whether it's defense of home and property, in those cases, it is actually justified to end another person's life. It actually is justified to fight another country or to defend yourself or defend other people. This is actually, in Luther's explanation, is that we're actually supposed to protect. So not just that we shouldn't hurt or harm our neighbor, but also help and support him in every physical need. And this may actually mean taking care of him. Now, the problem is that today we've got this obsession with comfort. I saw a screenshot of a tweet where some smooth-brained individual was talking about that it is actually the Christian obligation, if they feel that their family is in danger, to end their family's lives and their own life. Now, this betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of the Bible. Of course, no Bible verse was cited for this because there is no Bible verse. There's nothing in the Bible that says if you are suffering, you now have justification to end your own life, or if your children are suffering, then you have justification to end their lives. I think one of the best places to look at this is in the book of Job. How does Job's life go? Now, he has a great life for a period of time, and then he just unspeakable suffering is poured out upon Job. At any point in the entire book of Job, is he given permission to end his own life? The answer is no. Now, he curses his own life and he wishes that God would take it away. But thankfully, faithful Job does not end his own life, nor does he end the life of his wife, who is also suffering because she also lost her children and has to put up with all of Job's suffering as well. So this concept that you need to end your own life because you are suffering, or you need to end the lives of others because they are suffering, is entirely antithetical to the Bible. You cannot be a Christian and believe these things. You cannot be a Lutheran and believe these things. I mean, it's clearly stated in the Small Catechism. And if you want to, you can get into the back chunk of the Small Catechism and it'll explain more about these concepts. Now, this is often used as a justification for things like euthanasia. A person is suffering, therefore I'm going to intentionally end his life. Now, really quickly, I have to clarify that end-of-life decisions like, should we continue to artificially prolong this person's life or no, that's different than I am intentionally going to, on purpose, end the life of this child who is in utero, this person who is on a ventilator, this person who is in a coma, whatever. There's a difference between I'm going to prolong this person's life by, artificially stimulating their heart and their lungs and all this other stuff. There's a difference between saying, no, we're going to end care here, and saying, I am trying on purpose to kill this person. There's a difference between those two things. So I don't want to conflate those concepts. But euthanasia is when you see somebody and you decide that because of their suffering, their life needs to be ended. Sometimes by their own consent and sometimes without their consent. If somebody's in a hospital and maybe they're in a coma, depending on the country, another person may decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to end their life because I believe it's the moral, compassionate thing to do. Let me give you another example. Abortion, a lot of the time, the argument for abortion is made, really most of the time, it's just convenience. People just don't want to take care of the kid. They don't want to be responsible for the consequences of the actions that they took willingly, so they end the life of the child in utero. That's what abortion is. It's the intentional ending of a human life. There are some cases that are argued for. It says, well, what if? What if your child is going to be born in a situation where his father is a horrible person who forced himself on the mother? In such a case, should you end the life of the child? The better question is, does the child deserve to die because of the sin of the father? What about if the child is going to be born by all these genetic tests? You somehow determine that the child is going to be born with Down syndrome. Should you end the child's life because you perceive that he's going to have additional struggles in his life? Let's go to a different country. You can guess what country I'm talking about. What if the child is going to be born a girl? Well, the girl cannot carry on the family name and the girl cannot carry on the inheritance or whatever of the family. Should you be able to put the child to death because they will have a harder life? They will not have all of the advantages of being born a boy. Now, let's go back to the initial kind of tweet or whatever that I saw that sparked this thing. In this particular scenario, this guy was talking about a family where the father of the family was a horrible criminal. He was a horrible, violent murderer. And as a result, he was afraid that he was going to be taken and put on trial and justice would be done. He selfishly chose that what he was going to do was rather than endure the suffering, rather than endure the justice, or let's say it was an unjust trial, rather than enduring injustice and suffering, he was going to take matters into his own hands. He was going to claim responsibility and authority over his own life and claim that he had justification and not only end his own life, but end the lives of his children, because he didn't want that his children would go through potential suffering of having a father who was a known war criminal, for example. In such cases, we go back to the fifth commandment. Did he have the authority to take his own life? No. Your life is not your own. It was bought with a price. Did he have the authority to take his children's life? Again, no. Parents do not have the authority to take their children's lives. Did he have the justification to take his own life? No. He was not acting out a just action. He was not acting out a legal action. He was actually pursuing comfort in selfishness and trying to avoid suffering. In the case of his children, you could make the argument. You could say, well, look, this guy is trying to prevent his children from suffering. Let's say he thought the worst imaginable things were going to be happening to his children. Even still, he does not have the authority to end their lives. And even still, he does not have the justification to say they deserve to die, because that's what's happening when you take the life of another person. You're saying, I have the authority to take that life and they deserve to die. Suffering is not enough. It's not a crime to suffer. It's not something that automatically gives authority to anybody to take your life. I could think of all kinds of examples of somebody who's going through horrible suffering and they want to stop suffering, so they try to take matters into their own hands. They try to force. God is the one who makes the dead, makes alive. He's the one who moves people between life and death. For you to try to wrest that authority away from God is for you to commit the initial sin in the Bible, to try to be like God and say, hey, God, guess what? I actually have the authority to determine that this suffering is not worth going through. The reality is, suffering is a horrible thing. Suffering is tragic. Suffering would not exist if the world did not have sin in it. It was not affected by sin. But God frequently and regularly uses suffering to accomplish things. What you intended for evil, God used for good. This is what I think Joseph says to his brothers when they come back in Egypt. So it is not your place to say, you know what? I have decided that the suffering that I might endure and my family might endure, I alone have decided that it is not worth it, and it is better for them to not have life anymore. That is not your place. Even if you want to be a loving father and a man, it is not your place to wrest authority away from God, to in cowardice, and that is what it is, as horrible as suffering is, in cowardice say, you know what, I do not trust God, I do not trust that he will use this suffering to his benefit, I do not trust that he will get me through to the other end, I have to take control of the situation, and I have to sin, I have to commit murder in order to prevent suffering. I have to make this call. I have to make this decision. It is sinful. It is an idolatry of self. It is an idolatry of comfort. It is not trusting God. It is violating the fifth commandment, which says you shall not murder, whether it's to yourself or someone else. It is objectively, biblically sinful. Now, if you have some Bible verses to the contrary, please feel free to share them below. But if you're just thumping your chest with the bravado of, as a man, it's my job to prevent my kids from suffering, even if that means taking them out of this living world, I'm sorry, fam, you don't have a leg to stand on. You need to pick up the Bible and start finding some verses, because that's where we Christians get the idea of what is right and what is wrong, what is moral and what is immoral. So hopefully this helps address the question a little bit. Is it ever right? Is it ever appropriate to commit murder in order to prevent someone from suffering, or in order to stop somebody's suffering from continuing? The answer is no. The ends never justify the means. It is never okay to sin to try to accomplish good. Maybe a tough topic, but hopefully it was worth thinking about. God bless and take care.